Mother Bear kept chasing this family in the valley. The actual truth was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new to our channel. The Jackson family had been looking forward to their hiking trip in Pine Ridge Valley for months. Mark and Sophia, along with their children Emma, 10, and Noah, 8, wanted to disconnect from their busy city lives and reconnect with nature. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall pines as they followed the winding trail, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. "Look at those deer tracks, Dad." Noah pointed excitedly at markings in the soft dirt. Mark knelt down, smiling. "Good eye, buddy. They're fresh too, probably from this morning." The family continued their hike, breathing in the crisp mountain air. Birds called overhead, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. It was everything they had hoped for, until Sophia suddenly froze. "Mark," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Don't turn around quickly, but there's a bear watching us from those trees." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He slowly turned his head and saw it. A massive brown bear standing at the forest's edge, its dark eyes fixed directly on their family. The children hadn't noticed yet, still chattering about spotting a colorful bird. "Stay calm," Mark whispered to Sophia. "We'll slowly move away. Don't run." The family began to walk at a measured pace, trying not to show fear. But when Mark glanced back, his blood ran cold. The bear had stepped onto the trail and was following them. "The bear is following us," Emma said, her small hand gripping her mother's with surprising strength. "Just keep walking," Mark said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Remember what the ranger told us. Make noise. Stay together." They picked up their pace slightly, but the bear matched them step for step. Mark's mind raced through everything he knew about bear encounters. This wasn't normal behavior. Bears usually avoided humans unless they felt threatened or were protecting something. "Why won't it leave us alone?" Noah whimpered, tears forming in his eyes. The bear was now just 30 yards behind them, and with each passing minute, it seemed to draw closer. What puzzled Mark most was that the animal didn't seem aggressive. There was something almost deliberate about the way it moved, as if it were herding them. The afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the trail. They were still a mile from the ranger station, and cell service was non-existent in this remote part of the valley. "I think there's a clearing up ahead," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "Maybe we can see better what to do when we get there." The bear let out a low, rumbling sound. Not quite a growl, but something more like a moan. The strange noise sent shivers down their spines. What did it want from them? As they reached the clearing, Mark made a decision. "We need to try to scare it away. Everyone, make noise together." The family clapped their hands and shouted, hoping to intimidate the bear. But instead of retreating, the animal moaned again, pacing back and forth behind them. In the clearer light of the open space, Sophia noticed something. "Mark, look at her side. She's injured." Mark squinted and saw what his wife had spotted. A series of deep scratches along the bear's flank, the fur matted with dried blood. And then another realization hit him. "It's a mother bear," he said slowly. "She wouldn't leave her cub unless—" His words trailed off as the bear stopped pacing and stared directly at him, almost as if she understood what he was saying. In that moment, Mark had the strangest feeling that this encounter wasn't random, that somehow this bear had chosen them specifically. The question was, why? Emma tugged at her father's sleeve, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and concern. "Dad, is the bear trying to tell us something?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark hesitated, looking from his daughter to the bear and back again. Children often had an intuition adults had long forgotten. Maybe, sweetheart. I just don't know what. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and something else, a metallic smell that Mark recognized as blood. The bear paced a few steps to the right, then back again, its eyes never leaving the family. It moaned again, a sound so full of distress that it made Sophia's eyes water. "I've read about animals seeking human help before," Sophia said slowly, her background as a veterinary assistant surfacing through her fear. "It's rare, but it happens. Remember that story about the elephant that walked miles to find a doctor when it was injured?" Mark nodded, his mind racing. The bear was clearly trying to communicate something, and the more he observed its behavior, the less he believed it meant them harm. Still, a wild animal, especially a mother bear, was unpredictable, and his first responsibility was to his family's safety. "I'm scared," Noah whimpered, pressing against his mother's side. At 8 years old, his understanding of danger was limited, but his instincts told him something wasn't right. "It's okay to be scared," Mark assured him, patting his son's shoulder. "But remember what Grandpa always says? Sometimes being brave means being scared, but doing what's right anyway." The sunlight was fading fast now, casting long shadows across the clearing. They had maybe an hour of daylight left, and being caught in the wilderness after dark with a bear following them wasn't a scenario Mark wanted to contemplate. "We have 2 choices," he said, gathering his family close. "We can try to make it to the ranger station, it's about a mile away, or we can try to understand what the bear wants." "What if what she wants is to eat us?" Noah asked, his voice trembling. "If she wanted to hurt us, she would have done it already," Sophia reasoned, though her own voice betrayed her uncertainty. "She's had plenty of opportunities." Mark weighed their options. The bear was keeping its distance, about 20 yards now, but showed no signs of leaving. Every instinct told him to get his family to safety, but something deeper, something he couldn't explain, made him hesitate. "Look," Emma said suddenly, pointing at the bear. The mother bear had stopped pacing and was now sitting on her haunches, her eyes still fixed on them. But now she was making a different sound, a soft, huffing noise, almost like she was trying to call something. And then they heard it. A faint, high-pitched cry coming from somewhere beyond the clearing, back along the trail they had been following. It was a sound that made the mother bear's head whip around, her attention momentarily diverted. "That's a cub," Sophia whispered, her professional knowledge clicking into place. "Her cub is calling for her, but she's not going to it." "That doesn't make sense," Mark said, frowning. "A mother bear would never abandon her cub unless—" He trailed off as understanding began to dawn. "Unless she can't help it alone," Sophia finished for him. The pieces started falling into place, the scratches on the bear's side, her strange behavior, the desperate moans. She wasn't hunting them, she was seeking help. "I think her cub is trapped or injured," Mark said, the realization both terrifying and heartbreaking. "And somehow, she's identified us as potential helpers." "But how would she know we could help?" Emma asked, her fear giving way to curiosity. Mark had no scientific answer for that, only an instinctual one. "Animals know more than we give them credit for," he said softly. "They sense things we don't." As if to confirm his theory, the mother bear stood up and took a few steps back toward the trail, then stopped and looked at them again. The message seemed clear. "Follow me." "You can't be serious," Sophia said, reading her husband's thoughts. "We can't follow a wild bear into the woods when it's getting dark." "Mom," Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I think Dad's right. She needs our help." "It's too dangerous," Sophia insisted, pulling Noah closer to her side. Mark understood his wife's fear. It mirrored his own. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that they were being called to something important, something that transcended the normal boundaries between humans and wild animals. "What if we compromise?" he suggested. "You and Noah head toward the ranger station. It's not far, and the trail is clear. Emma and I will follow the bear, but only for a short distance to see what's happening. If there's any sign of danger, we'll turn back immediately and join you." Sophia hesitated, torn between keeping her family together and getting her youngest to safety. "I don't like splitting up," she said. "What if something happens to you and Emma?" "I've got the emergency whistle and the bear spray," Mark assured her. "And we won't go far, I promise." The mother bear moaned again, more urgently this time, and the distant crying of the cubs seemed to grow more distressed. Noah looked up at his mother with the tear-filled eyes. "Maybe we should help the baby bear, Mom. If it's hurt." Sophia looked at her son, surprised by his compassion even in the face of fear. It was moments like these that reminded her why they brought their children into the wilderness, to teach them about courage, empathy, and respect for all living things. "Okay," she said finally, though her heart raced at the decision. "But Mark, you keep that whistle ready. 3 short blasts if you need us to send help." Mark nodded, grateful for his wife's trust. He knew what he was proposing was unorthodox, possibly dangerous, but something deep inside told him it was the right thing to do. "We'll meet you at the ranger station in 1 hour," he promised. "If we're not there, tell them exactly where you last saw us." They quickly redistributed their supplies. Mark and Emma took the first aid kit, bear spray, and a powerful flashlight, while Sophia kept the map, compass, and extra water for the journey to the ranger station. As Sophia and Noah prepared to leave, Emma gave her little brother a quick hug. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Dad knows what he's doing." Noah nodded bravely, wiping away his tears. "Help the baby bear," he said, showing a maturity beyond his years. With one last concerned look, Sophia took Noah's hand and started toward the ranger station, walking quickly while there was still light to guide their way. Mark watched them go, a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. Had he made the right decision? He turned to find the mother bear still waiting, her dark eyes filled with what he could only describe as desperate hope. "Okay," he said to Emma, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "Let's see what she wants to show us. Stay close to me at all times." Together, they took their first cautious steps toward the bear, who immediately turned and started moving back along the trail, stopping every few paces to ensure they were following. "This is so weird," Emma whispered, clinging to her father's hand. "It's like something from a movie." "Life is stranger than fiction sometimes," Mark replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the bear's movements, ready to react if her behavior changed. The bear led them about 100 yards back along the trail, before veering off into a denser section of forest. Mark hesitated at the tree line. Following a bear off the marked trail as darkness approached was testing the limits of his courage. But then they heard it again, the pitiful crying of the cub, louder now and clearly in distress. The mother bear looked back at them as if pleading. "It's not far," Mark said, making his decision. "We can at least see what's wrong." He turned on the flashlight as they entered the forest, the beam cutting through the growing shadows. The underbrush was thick, making progress slow, but the mother bear seemed to be choosing the easiest path possible for them to follow. The crying grew louder until they reached a small, rocky ravine. The mother bear stopped at the edge, looking down, then back at them. Mark directed his flashlight beam down into the ravine and gasped. About 15 feet below, wedged between two large rocks, was a small brown bear cub. Its fur was matted with mud and what looked like blood, and one of its hind legs was pinned awkwardly beneath it. The cub saw its mother and cried out again, struggling futilely against the rocks that held it captive. "The poor thing," Emma whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "It must have fallen and gotten stuck." Mark assessed the situation quickly. The ravine wasn't particularly deep, but its sides were steep and slippery with loose rocks and dirt. One wrong step could send a person tumbling down, potentially causing more harm than good. The mother bear paced anxiously at the edge, occasionally reaching a paw down toward her cub, but unable to reach it or help it climb out. "That's why she came to us," Mark said softly, understanding flooding through him. "She can't reach her baby." Emma looked up at her father, determination replacing fear in her young face. "We have to help, Dad, we have to." Mark nodded, already formulating a plan. He shrugged off his backpack and began rummaging through it. "I'm going to try to climb down," he said. "The cub looks small enough that I might be able to lift it out if I can free its leg." "What about the mother bear?" Emma asked, glancing nervously at the large animal that was now watching their every move. "That's the risk," Mark admitted. "But I think she understands we're trying to help. You're going to stay right here with the bear spray. If her behavior changes at all, if she shows any signs of aggression, you use it, okay? Remember how I taught you?" Emma nodded solemnly, accepting the can of bear spray with steady hands. At 10 years old, she was old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, yet young enough to still believe in the possibility of miracles. Mark found what he was looking for in his pack: a sturdy rope they'd brought for securing their food away from wildlife at their campsite. It wasn't long enough to reach the bottom of the ravine, but it would help him get partway down safely. He secured one end of the rope to a thick tree trunk near the edge of the ravine, testing it with his weight. The mother bear watched, making no move to interfere. "I'll be right back," Mark promised Emma, giving her a quick hug. "Remember, any sign of trouble, you use the spray and run back toward the trail." "Be careful, Dad," Emma whispered, her voice tight with worry. Mark took a deep breath and began his descent into the ravine, using the rope to control his movements on the steepest section. Loose rocks skittered down around him as he carefully picked his way toward the trapped cub. The little bear growled and whimpered as Mark approached, its fear obvious. The mother bear above made an answering sound, something between a grunt and a moan, that seemed to calm the cub slightly. "It's okay, little one," Mark said softly, using the same gentle tone he used with injured animals on their small hobby farm back home. "I'm here to help." He reached the cub and crouched down, assessing the situation up close. The bear's hind leg was wedged tightly between two heavy rocks, and there was a shallow gash on its side that was matted with dirt and dried blood. The cub was exhausted from its struggles, its breathing rapid and shallow. Mark knew he needed to work quickly, both because of the fading light and because the cub was clearly in pain. He positioned himself beside the larger of the two rocks, pinning the cub's leg and braced his shoulder against it. "Dad, is it okay?" Emma called from above, her face just visible at the edge of the ravine. "Its leg is stuck, but I think I can free it," Mark called back. "How's Mama Bear doing?" "She's just watching," Emma replied. "She seems, I don't know, nervous but not angry." That was good enough for Mark. He turned his attention back to the trapped cub and spoke to it softly. "This might hurt a little, but it's going to help you get free. Just hang in there." With that, he put all his strength into pushing against the rock. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding sound, the rock shifted slightly, just enough to create a gap. The cub immediately tried to pull its leg free, but let out a yelp of pain. "Easy, easy," Mark murmured, maintaining pressure on the rock, while reaching with his other hand to gently guide the cub's leg. He could feel that something wasn't right. The leg hung at an odd angle once freed, possibly broken or badly sprained. The cub scrambled backward once its leg was free, pressing itself against the ravine wall, whimpering. It was clearly too injured to climb out on its own. Mark weighed his options. The cub was small, probably only about 20 pounds, but handling an injured wild animal was dangerous, even one this young. Yet leaving it here wasn't an option either. "Emma," he called up, "I'm going to try to bring it up. The cub's leg is injured. It can't climb out on its own." "What can I do?" Emma asked, her face serious with concentration. "Keep watching the mother," Mark instructed, "and be ready to help me when I get to the top." He approached the cub slowly, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "I know you're scared, little one, but your mom is waiting for you up there. Let's get you home." The cub growled weakly as Mark reached for it, but it was too exhausted to put up much resistance. With careful movements, Mark scooped the small bear into his arms, cradling it against his chest like he would an injured dog. The cub was surprisingly warm and much heavier than it looked. "I've got you," Mark whispered, feeling the rapid beat of the cub's heart against his own. "Let's get you back to your mama." Climbing one-handed up a steep ravine while carrying an injured bear cub was possibly the most challenging thing Mark had ever attempted. He used the rope to help steady himself, fighting for each foothold as he made his way up. Near the top, the ground gave way beneath his foot, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought they would both tumble back down. But Emma was there instantly, grabbing her father's free hand and pulling with strength that surprised him. With one final effort, Mark hauled himself and the cub over the edge of the ravine, collapsing onto solid ground with the small bear still clutched against his chest. The mother bear approached cautiously, her nose twitching as she sniffed her cub. Mark gently set the little bear down on the ground, backing away to give the mother space. "Its leg might be broken," he told Emma quietly as they retreated a few steps, "and it has a cut on its side that could get infected." The reunion between mother and cub was touching. The larger bear gently nuzzled her baby, making soft huffing sounds as she inspected its injuries. The cub whimpered and tried to stand, only to collapse when it put weight on its injured leg. "They need help," Emma said, watching the bears with concern in her eyes. "The cub can't walk far like that." Mark checked his watch. They'd been gone about 20 minutes, which left them 40 minutes to make it to the ranger station before Sophia would raise the alarm. It would be completely dark soon, making travel through the forest dangerous. "We need to get back to the trail," he said. "But you're right, they need help." As if understanding their dilemma, the mother bear did something astonishing. She carefully picked up her cub by the scruff of the neck, lifting it clear of the ground, and took a few steps toward them before setting it down again. Then she looked directly at Mark, as if waiting. I think she wants us to lead her somewhere safe," Mark said, amazed by the bear's behavior. "The ranger station?" Emma suggested. "They'd know how to help the cub." Mark nodded slowly. "It's worth a try, if she'll follow us that far." They gathered their supplies quickly and started making their way back to the main trail, moving slowly enough for the mother bear to follow with her injured cub. Every few yards, the mother would have to stop and pick up her baby again, clearly struggling with the weight and awkward burden. Once they reached the trail, Mark made a decision. He took off his jacket and laid it on the ground. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself, but it might work. He approached the bears cautiously, holding the jacket out before him. The mother growled softly but didn't move away. "I want to help carry your cub," Mark said, knowing the bear couldn't understand his words but hoping his intentions were somehow clear. "It's too far for you to carry him alone." With excruciatingly slow movements, Mark placed the jacket beside the cub. The mother bear watched suspiciously, but allowed him to gently wrap the small bear in the fabric, creating a makeshift sling. "Dad, what are you doing?" Emma whispered, her eyes wide. "Creating a stretcher," Mark replied, keeping his movements deliberate and his voice calm. "If the mother will let me, we can help carry the cub to the ranger station. It'll be faster and easier on both of them." It was a risky plan, but the mother bear seemed to understand. As Mark carefully lifted the cub in its jacket stretcher, she made no move to stop him. Instead, she fell into step beside them as they started walking, her eyes never leaving her baby. The journey to the ranger station was like something from a dream. Father and daughter walking through the darkening forest, followed by a massive brown bear, carrying her injured cub in a makeshift stretcher. They moved as quickly as they dared, guided by the beam of the flashlight and the well-worn trail. "No one is ever going to believe this," Emma said as they walked, her voice a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "I'm not sure I believe it myself," Mark admitted, adjusting his grip on the makeshift stretcher. The cub had settled into a state of exhausted stillness, occasionally making soft whimpering sounds when they hit a rough patch of trail. The mother bear stayed close, sometimes so near that Mark could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. There was something humbling about being trusted by such a powerful wild creature, a trust he was determined not to betray. As they rounded the final bend in the trail, the lights of the ranger station came into view. Mark could make out figures moving around outside. Sophia and Noah must have arrived and raised the alarm. He could see the distinctive uniforms of the park rangers in the glow of the station's exterior lights. "Emma," he said quietly, "run ahead and tell them what's happening. Tell them we have an injured bear cub and its mother is with us. Tell them not to raise their weapons or make sudden movements." Emma nodded and sprinted toward the station, her small figure quickly disappearing into the growing darkness. Mark slowed his pace, speaking softly to both bears. "We're almost there. Help is coming for your little one." He could see commotion at the ranger station as Emma reached it. People gathering, pointing in his direction. He hoped they would understand the unusual situation before reacting defensively. A moment later, Emma returned with 2 rangers following cautiously behind her. They stopped a respectful distance away, clearly shocked by the sight before them. "Sir," one of them called, her voice steady but wary, "please move very slowly. We have tranquilizers ready if needed." "She's not aggressive," Mark called back. "She led us to her cub. It's injured. Possible broken leg and a gash on its side. She's been letting me carry it." The rangers exchanged astonished glances but quickly shifted into professional mode. The female ranger approached slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice. "I'm Ranger Chen," she said, keeping her eyes on the mother bear. "We have a wildlife veterinarian on call. If you can make it just a little further, we can help this little one." The mother bear seemed to grow more agitated as more humans appeared, huffing and swaying slightly on her feet. "She's getting nervous," Mark observed. "Too many people, too much noise." Ranger Chen nodded in understanding. "Everyone back up," she ordered the small crowd that had gathered. "Give them space. Mr. Jackson, if you can bring the cub to the side building there, it's our medical facility. We'll have the vet meet you." Mark started moving again, relieved when the mother bear continued following. They made their way to a small, cabin-like structure set apart from the main ranger station. A woman in a green uniform was waiting at the door, her expression a mixture of professional calm and amazement. "I'm Doctor Reyes, the wildlife veterinarian," she said, holding the door open. "Bring the cub inside. We'll need to figure out what to do about Mama, though." This was the tricky part. The mother bear had followed them this far on faith, but separating her from her cub, even temporarily, could trigger her protective instincts. "She's been remarkably calm so far," Mark said. "Is there any way she can see what's happening to her cub? Maybe through a window?" Dr. Reyes considered this, then nodded. "There's a large observation window on the side of the building. If she stays calm, we can keep the blinds open so she can see her cub is safe." It was an unorthodox approach, but this entire situation had left conventional wildlife management protocols far behind. With Ranger Chen creating a safe perimeter, Mark carried the injured cub into the medical facility, acutely aware of the mother bear watching his every move. Once inside, he gently placed the jacket-wrapped cub on an examination table, where Dr. Reyes immediately began assessing its injuries. Through the large window, they could see the mother bear pacing outside, occasionally rising on her hind legs to get a better view inside. Ranger Chen stood nearby, ready to intervene if necessary, but the bear showed no signs of aggression, only concern. "This is remarkable, Doctor," Reyes said as she carefully examined the cub. "In 20 years of wildlife medicine, I've never seen anything like this. Bears are typically extremely defensive of their cubs around humans." "Maybe she knew she had no other choice," Mark suggested, watching as the veterinarian cleaned the cub's wound with gentle efficiency. Dr. Reyes nodded thoughtfully. "Animals are smarter and more adaptable than we give them credit for. This mother somehow recognized that humans were her cub's best chance for survival." The examination confirmed Mark's suspicions. The cub had a fractured hind leg and a laceration on its side that, while not deep, was showing early signs of infection. Dr. Reyes worked quickly, cleaning the wound, administering antibiotics, and splinting the broken leg. Through it all, the mother bear remained outside, watching attentively but staying remarkably calm. "Dad!" Emma's voice broke through his concentration. He turned to see his daughter entering the medical facility with Sophia and Noah right behind her. "Mark!" Sophia rushed to him, throwing her arms around him in relief. "When Emma came running into the station with that wild story, I thought she was exaggerating. But then the Rangers confirmed it, and—" She broke off, looking at the bear cub on the examination table. "It's actually true. You really did help rescue a bear cub." Noah peered at the small bear with wide eyes. "Is it going to be okay?" he asked. Dr. Reyes smiled at the boy. "Thanks to your dad and sister, yes. He'll need time to heal, but he should make a full recovery." The family stood together, watching as the veterinarian finished treating the cub. Outside, the mother bear continued her vigilant watch, occasionally making soft vocalizations as if reassuring her baby she was still there. "What happens now?" Mark asked as doctor. Reyes secured the last bandage. "We'd normally keep the cub for observation and release it once it's healed," she explained. "But with the mother still present and so invested, we need to consider alternatives. Separating them for weeks would cause significant stress to both animals." Ranger Chen, who had come inside for an update, offered a suggestion. "There's a fenced wildlife recovery area about a half-mile from here. It's secure but spacious, with natural features and shelter. We could temporarily relocate both bears there until the cub is healed enough to return to the wild." "And the mother would just go along with that?" Sophia asked skeptically. Ranger Chen shrugged. Based on what I've seen tonight, it's possible. This is highly unusual behavior for a wild bear. She's demonstrated an extraordinary level of trust in humans, specifically your family." Dr. Reyes finished her work and stepped back from the examination table. "The cub is stable now, but we'll need to move it soon. The mother must be getting increasingly anxious." As if on cue, the mother bear outside let out a low moan, rising again on her hind legs to peer through the window. "I have an idea," Mark said, looking at his family and then at the rangers. "What if we help guide them both to the recovery area? The mother has been following us willingly so far. If she sees us carrying her cub, she might continue to follow." The rangers exchanged doubtful glances, but Emma spoke up confidently. "It will work. She trusts us now." After some discussion, a plan was formed. The cub would be placed in a proper transport carrier, and a small team including Mark, Ranger Chen, and Dr. Reyes would walk to the recovery area. Everyone else, including the rest of the Jackson family, would follow at a safe distance. When everything was ready, Mark carried the carrier outside, moving slowly and speaking softly to the mother bear. "We're taking your baby somewhere safe," he told her, making eye contact with the massive animal. "Somewhere you can both stay until he's healed." To everyone's amazement, the bear fell into step behind them as they began walking toward the recovery area. She maintained a cautious distance but showed no signs of aggression or distress as long as she could see the carrier containing her cub. The procession made its way through the darkened forest, guided by powerful flashlights. The recovery area turned out to be a natural-looking enclosure nestled among the trees, with a fresh water source, sheltered dens, and plenty of space for the bears to move around. "We use this facility for wildlife rehabilitation," Ranger Chen explained as they approached. "It's designed to provide a safe space for recovery while minimizing human contact. That way, the animals don't become too habituated to people before release." When they reached the enclosure, Dr. Reyes carefully opened the transport carrier inside the fenced area, allowing the cub to hobble out. It moved awkwardly with its splinted leg but seemed alert and more energetic after receiving treatment. The mother bear watched intently from just outside the open gate, her massive head swinging between her cub and the human standing nearby. For a tense moment, Mark wondered if she would refuse to enter what was essentially a cage, no matter how spacious and natural it appeared. But then the cub cried out, a plaintive sound that seemed to make the mother's decision for her. She lumbered through the gate, immediately going to her baby and sniffing it thoroughly, inspecting the strange new bandages and splint with cautious curiosity. "That's our cue to leave," Dr. Reyes said quietly, backing toward the gate. "We need to give them space to settle in." Mark nodded, but found himself reluctant to leave. There was something profound about what had happened today, a connection between species that defied explanation. As he finally turned to go, the mother bear looked up, her dark eyes meeting his one last time. "Thank you," he whispered, feeling both foolish and deeply moved. "Take care of your little one." The bear made a soft huffing sound, then turned her attention back to her cub, guiding it toward one of the sheltered dens. Ranger Chen secured the gate, and the group made their way back to the main station. Emma slipped her hand into her father's, her face thoughtful in the glow of the flashlights. "Dad," she said after a while, "how did the bear know we would help her? How did she know to trust us specifically?" Mark shook his head, wondering the same thing. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe she'd observed humans before. Maybe she sensed something about us that told her we weren't a threat. Or maybe," Sophia suggested, joining the conversation, "she was simply desperate enough to take a chance on the only help available." When they reached the ranger station, hot drinks were waiting for them. The Jackson family sat together, processing the extraordinary events of the day while the rangers made arrangements for monitoring the bears overnight. "You folks had quite an adventure," Ranger Chen said, joining them with a mug of her own. "I've been working these mountains for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened today." "Will they really be okay?" Noah asked, his earlier fear completely replaced by concern for the bears. "The prognosis is good," she assured him. "Dr. Reyes is excellent at what she does, and young bears are remarkably resilient. The cub should heal well, and having his mother with him will reduce stress significantly." "How long will they need to stay in the recovery area?" Mark asked. "Probably about 3 weeks," the ranger replied. "We'll need to check the cub's progress regularly, but we'll do it with minimal human contact. The goal is to release them back into the wild as soon as it's safe to do so." Later that night, as the family settled into temporary accommodations provided by the Park Service, Mark found himself unable to sleep. He stepped outside onto the small porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky and replaying the day's events in his mind. Sophia joined him a few minutes later, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "Penny, for your thoughts," she said, leaning her head against his arm. "I was just thinking about connections," Mark replied, "about how a wild animal somehow knew to seek help from strangers, and how we somehow knew to trust her intentions. It doesn't make rational sense, and yet it happened." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Maybe it doesn't need to make rational sense. Maybe some connections transcend species and logic. "The kids were amazing today," Mark said, changing the subject slightly. "Especially Emma. She never panicked, not once." "She's her father's daughter," Sophia replied with a smile. "Stubborn and compassionate in equal measure." Mark chuckled. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the forest. Tomorrow they would need to adjust their hiking plans, but no one in the family seemed to mind. Some experiences were worth the disruption of schedules. "You know," Sophia said after a while, "when Emma came running into the ranger station with that wild story about you following a bear into the woods, my first thought was that it couldn't possibly be true. My second thought was that if anyone would end up in such an impossible situation, it would be you." Mark laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment, too." 3 weeks later, the Jackson family returned to Pine Ridge Valley. They had continued their vacation at a different location within the national forest, but all of them had felt drawn back to see the conclusion of the bear saga. Ranger Chen greeted them warmly at the station. "Perfect timing," she said. "We're planning to release them tomorrow morning. The cub's leg has healed remarkably well, and both bears are ready to return to the wild." "Can we watch?" Emma asked eagerly. The ranger hesitated. "Normally, we don't allow civilians to observe wildlife releases, but given your family's unique involvement in this case, I think we can make an exception, as long as you follow all safety protocols." The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for a new beginning. The Jackson family, along with Ranger Chen, Dr. Reyes, and 2 additional rangers, made their way quietly to the recovery enclosure. The bears were active, the cub moving with barely a hint of its former injury as it explored the familiar confines of the enclosure one last time. The mother bear seemed to sense something was different about today. She watched the approaching humans with alert interest. "We'll open the far gate," Dr. Reyes explained. "It leads directly into a secluded section of forest that will give them plenty of cover. Bears generally move away quickly once released." The family stayed back at a safe distance while the rangers prepared for the release. Mark felt a strange mixture of emotions. joy that the bears would return to their natural home, but also a bittersweet sense of ending. These creatures had become important to his family in ways he couldn't fully articulate. When everything was ready, Ranger Chen slowly opened the gate that would lead the bears back to freedom. At first, neither animal moved, both seeming uncertain about the change. Then the mother bear approached the open gate cautiously, sniffing the air of true wilderness beyond. She turned back to look at her cub, who remained hesitant by the den they had shared for the past 3 weeks. For a moment, the mother bear seemed torn between freedom and the safety of the enclosure. Then, surprisingly, she turned and looked directly at where the Jackson family stood. Even from a distance, Mark felt the weight of her gaze. Intelligent, knowing, and somehow grateful. "She remembers you," Ranger Chen whispered, amazement clear in her voice. The mother bear made a soft huffing sound, then turned back to her cub, nudging it gently toward the open gate. The young bear took a few tentative steps, then gained confidence, moving with only the slightest hint of a limp. Together, mother and cub crossed the threshold into the wild. They paused just beyond the gate, the mother bear sniffing the air and scanning their surroundings alertly. Then, with one last glance back at the humans who had helped them, they moved deeper into the forest, their brown fur soon blending with the dappled shadows of the trees. "They're gone," Noah whispered, a trace of sadness in his young voice. "Not gone," Mark corrected gently, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "They're home." Dr. Reyes closed her notebook, smiling at the family. "This is a successful release by any standard. The cub is moving well, and they're both exhibiting normal, healthy behavior. I'd say your bear rescue was a complete success." As they walked back to the ranger station, Emma suddenly stopped and tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, I just realized something. Remember how you knew exactly what to do with the bears? How you weren't afraid to follow the mother bear when she needed help?" "I wouldn't say I wasn't afraid," Mark laughed. "I was terrified. But you still helped," Emma persisted. "And remember how the mother bear seemed to pick us specifically to follow? What if—" She hesitated, her young face serious. "What if there was a reason she chose us?" Mark exchanged glances with Sophia, unsure where their daughter was going with this. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sophia asked. Emma looked up at her parents, her eyes bright with sudden understanding. "Remember that story Grandpa used to tell, about how he got lost in these mountains when he was young, and how a bear stood guard over him all night during a snowstorm? He always said the bear saved his life." Mark felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. His father had indeed told that story, about getting separated from his hiking group as a teenager, about huddling in a shallow cave as a snowstorm raged, and about waking to find a large bear sleeping at the entrance, its body blocking the bitter wind and providing life-saving warmth. "That happened right here in Pine Ridge Valley," Mark said slowly, memories flooding back. "Dad always said it was like the bear knew he needed help." "Maybe bears have long memories," Ranger Chen suggested quietly, having overheard the conversation. "Or maybe there's some connection between your family and these mountains that we can't fully understand." Noah's eyes were wide. "Does that mean the bear mommy was saying thank you? Because Grandpa's bear helped him, and now we helped her bear?" "I don't know, buddy," Mark replied honestly. "But I'd like to think there's some kind of balance in the world. That kindness comes back around, even across generations and species." They reached the ranger station, where Ranger Chen offered them coffee and hot chocolate before they began their journey home. As they sat on the wide porch enjoying their drinks in the morning sunshine, a Park Service photographer approached them. "I hope you don't mind, but I took some photos during the release," she said, showing them her camera display. It's for our records, but I thought you might like copies as well." She scrolled through the images. The bears in the enclosure, the opened gate, the first cautious steps toward freedom. And then one final, remarkable shot. The mother bear paused at the edge of the forest, looking back directly at the camera, her cub beside her. Something in her posture and gaze conveyed not just wildness, but wisdom. "Can we have copies of all of these?" Sophia asked, clearly moved by the images. "Of course," the photographer replied. "I'll email them to you. This was a special case, one for the record books, according to Ranger Chen." As they prepared to leave, Ranger Chen handed Mark an official-looking envelope. "The Park Service would like to offer your family a special commendation for wildlife conservation," she explained. "What you did was technically against standard protocols. Following a wild bear is not something we'd ever recommend, but we can't argue with the results. You saved that cub's life." Mark accepted the envelope, feeling somewhat embarrassed by the recognition. "We just did what seemed right at the time," he said simply. "Sometimes that's all any of us can do," the ranger replied with a smile. During the drive home, the family was unusually quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about their extraordinary experience. It wasn't until they were nearly home that Noah broke the silence. "Can we go back to see them someday?" he asked. "The bears?" Mark glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "They're wild animals, buddy. They need to live their lives in the forest, not around people. But I promise we'll visit Pine Ridge Valley again." "And maybe," Emma added thoughtfully, "they'll remember us, even if we don't see them." That evening, after the children were in bed, Mark found himself sitting on the back porch of their home, looking out at the distant mountains silhouetted against the night sky. Sophia joined him, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, settling beside him. "I was thinking about connections," Mark replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "About my dad's bear story and our bear story and how Emma put them together." "Do you think there could really be a connection?" Sophia asked. "Between what happened to your father all those years ago and what happened to us last week?" Mark took a sip of his tea before answering. "I don't know. Rationally, it seems impossible. But then, a wild bear leading humans to her injured cub and trusting them to help seems impossible too." "Yet it happened," Sophia said softly. "Yet it happened," Mark agreed. "Maybe there are patterns and connections in the world that we don't fully understand. Maybe kindness creates ripples that travel further than we can see." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in those distant mountains, a mother bear and her cub were free, moving through their wild home, carrying on with the ancient rhythms of bear life. And somehow, improbably, their story had become intertwined with the Jackson family's story. A reminder that sometimes the most unlikely connections can lead to the most powerful moments of compassion and understanding. The next morning, Mark called his father, now living in a retirement community 2 states away. "Dad," he said when the older man answered, "you're not going to believe what happened on our hiking trip." And as he began to tell the story of the mother bear who kept chasing them in the valley, Mark could almost feel the invisible threads of connection stretching across time and species, reminding him that in a world often divided, unexpected bonds of trust and compassion could still emerge, even between the most unlikely companions. 3 months later, the Jackson family received a package from Pine Ridge Valley National Park. Inside was a beautiful framed photograph of the mother bear and her cub, taken by a wildlife camera deep in the forest. A note from Ranger Chen explained that both bears appeared to be thriving. The cub, now showing no signs of its earlier injury. The family hung the photograph in their living room, a permanent reminder of their extraordinary encounter and the powerful connection they had formed with two wild creatures in need. Visitors often asked about the picture, giving the Jacksons the opportunity to share their remarkable story. "The truth is," Mark would always conclude when telling the tale, "she wasn't chasing us at all. She was asking for our help in the only way she knew how. And the real miracle wasn't just that we were able to save her cub. It was that somehow, across the species divide, we understood each other when it mattered most." In the years that followed, the Jackson family returned to Pine Ridge Valley many times. They never encountered the mother bear and her cub again, but they didn't need to. Some connections, once formed, don't require constant renewal to remain meaningful. They exist in memory and in the heart, changing how we see the world and our place in it forever. Emma, inspired by their adventure, eventually went on to study wildlife biology, specializing in human-wildlife conflict resolution. "I want to help build bridges between species," she explained when choosing her college major. "I want to find ways for humans and wild animals to coexist with greater understanding and less fear." Noah grew up with a deep love for the outdoors and an uncanny ability to sense when animals were in distress. Local neighbors often called on him to help with injured wildlife, and he seemed to have a natural touch that calmed even the most frightened creatures. And Mark and Sophia watched their children grow with a sense of wonder and gratitude for that pivotal day in the valley, when a desperate mother bear had somehow recognized in them the capacity for compassion that transcended species boundaries. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Mark would find himself thinking about the mother bear's unwavering determination to find help for her cub. He admired her courage in approaching humans, creatures she would normally avoid at all costs, because her love for her baby outweighed her fear. There was a profound lesson in that, he thought. Sometimes love required stepping beyond comfort zones, beyond fears and boundaries, to find help when it was needed most. Sometimes trust had to be given before it was earned, and sometimes the most important connections in life came from the most unexpected places, even from the desperate eyes of a wild creature at the edge of a forest, silently asking for help that only humans could provide. That, in the end, was the true story behind why the mother bear kept chasing them in the valley. Not a story of pursuit or danger, but one of trust, compassion, and connection. A reminder that in moments of genuine need, the barriers between species could dissolve, revealing a shared capacity for understanding that was nothing short of miraculous. And every time the Jackson family told their story, those who heard it walked away with a renewed sense of wonder about the natural world and our place within it. Not as conquerors or outsiders, but as fellow creatures capable of extraordinary acts of compassion when called upon by those in need, even when that call came from the most unexpected source. A desperate mother bear, chasing a family through a valley, hoping against hope that they would understand.